It's that time of year again. Teams are going up. Everybody's feeling great about it. But then there's the flip side of the coin, particularly in France, where teams are going down and everybody's feeling sad about it. And clubs and cities and fan bases are full of epic sadness. And we are here to watch from the sidelines and say, interesting. There's one particularly interesting relegation that's occurring that I have to talk about. A relegation that indicts the structure of the sport, a relegation that boggles the mind and just doesn't make a whole lot of sense and is almost a counter argument for certain ownership structures. This is a relegation happening in the French leagues. It's in the second French league, and it involves Manchester City somehow. Yes, I know what you're thinking. They play in England. Don't worry, I'm not one of those Americans. I know a map. And Manchester City is still involved. Even though Manchester City is doing really well, their owners, which is basically the country of the United Arab Emirates, they are not. They're not doing well. They own a bunch of different clubs in something that is called the City Group. This is the full lore here. And the City Group has teams like Melbourne City, Mumbai City, NYCFC. On my main channel, made a deep video about NYCFC. Well, the City Football Group owns all of them. The surprise package in La Liga, Girona, the team that's in the top four, right, in Spain that absolutely nobody saw coming. They are owned by the City Group. City Group also owns a team called Troyes. Now, Troyes is headed in the exact other direction. And they entered a match yesterday. Against the team that is literally the bottom of Ligue 2, right? Valenciennes. That's a team that is dead last in the French second division, where Troyes is. Even though they were in the first division not long ago, they were relegated down to the second division. And Troyes is currently in 17th in the second division. So, hanging on the precipice there, hanging on the edge, 18 to 20 get relegated, right? That's a scary place to be. But this match against Valenciennes, if they're bottom of the league, right, you're 2 points clear of 18th, this is a must-win situation for Troyes. And they go onto the field, and it's 1-1 in the 89th minute, and then all hell breaks loose. So we've got the ref stopping play because pyrotechnic, this is the Troyes away end right here. This area over here, that's the Troyes away end. They are throwing flares onto the field. In bunches, they are throwing flares onto the field. And after a while, that starts to anger the Troyes players because you'll look up at the clock here, 88:30, right? There's still plenty. I mean, if this was Bayer Leverkusen, the match hasn't even started yet. But we're already deciding that the 1-1 between Troyes and Valenciennes, obviously a disappointing result for Troyes, is worth throwing a bunch of flares on the field. And what you need to pay attention to is Troyes is in the blue here. Their color is blue, and they start meandering towards the flares. And this is where things get particularly complicated, because as this conversation is going on, you see Troyes players picking the flares up. Did you see that? They pick the flares up and they throw them back. They're frustrated because they want to be able to finish the game. This guy, he runs up and chucks it back into the stand. Well, if I know anything about French fans, that's not going to go down well, right? So he chucks it back into the stand, right? Which I might add, fantastic form on that. Great arm. And then you see the Troyes players kind of run in. They realize that is going to make things worse and not better. Now we've got substitutes throwing flares back into the stands, back into the fans. This is now devolved into a situation where instead of a couple of bad apples throw a couple of flares onto the field, you've got Troyes players and Troyes fans throwing lit objects back and forth. Like, you're throwing Roman candles at each other, right? And this is clearly, you see them, they stop zooming in on it on the broadcast, but you see flares just getting chucked back into the stands, and then the fans are throwing them back. This is like a high-stakes game of catch. That goes on until the end of this video, and then eventually the match is abandoned. They're still waiting to see what the actual judgment's going to be, whether they give them a loss, whether they schedule a replay, because as things stand, if this slots as a draw, Troyes is basically hanging on for dear life, right? 2 points clear of 18th in 17th. Now, if you are a French fan in particular, or somebody that's very, very well read, then you will realize that I've been making a mistake over the course of this entire video, because One, I thought it'd be funny to mess with you. Two, this is only happening for 1 year. So not only is Troyes really underperforming for a team that's owned by the City Group, we're going to get into why the fans hate them more because they've done a lot of really like questionable, sucky, like honestly, they've done really, really bad stuff with Troyes players and everything. But Ligue 2 for 1 year has an extra relegation spot. And that would be 17th, which is what Troyes is in. So they really needed to win this match against Valenciennes to have a chance to not get relegated. Talk about being unlucky. It's 1 year. They're relegating 4 teams and promoting 2 teams because the league is going from 20 to 18 teams. 4 teams are getting relegated this 1 year, and Troyes is the team that is very firmly, I might add, locked into 17th. They are 7 points away from Dunkirk, who is in 16th, which means they basically need to win against Valenciennes in order to, have an opportunity to knock Dunkirk off their perch. But why is Troyes so freaking bad? Well, how about the fact that they had their record signing, a guy named Savio. I don't know if you've ever heard of Savio. Well, Savio was signed for $5.5 million from Atlético Mineiro. Atlético Mineiro is a team in Brazil. Savio has then proceeded to, over the past 2 seasons, never play for Troyes. He played on loan at PSV and on loan at Girona, which is a little sus. I'm going to be honest, because they're all in the same ownership group. Even though Girona is technically 47%, look, they are 47% owned by Citigroup, but Citigroup is still making the decisions. The same way Jim Ratcliffe owns 25% of Manchester United, but is in charge of all football operations, right? Like City is making the decisions at Girona, and they basically did a loan with themselves. It's the Obama meme where they're putting the medal around the neck, right? And they're like, oh, what a great signing. We had to negotiate really hard with ourselves to get Savio over here. So Savio is the record signing of Troyes, and he never played for Troyes over the last 2 years. So Troyes is essentially like, if you've got the top, the heads up part of the coin, right? And that's Manchester City, and that is Girona, and maybe a little NYCFC, maybe a little Melbourne City, because they both, NYCFC won the title in MLS a few years ago, right? Those are the teams that they're really paying attention. And then the bottom side of that, it's like the dark side of the moon. This is what Pink Floyd was trying to tell us about, right? That there's clubs like Troyes that exist just to kind of promote and advance the teams that are on the other side of the spectrum for this giant ownership group. And I just want to say, the fans have been protesting this for a while. Like I mentioned, Troyes was promoted in 2021 into Ligue 1, and then they fired their coach when they were 13th in Ligue 1, and they hired a guy named Kisnorbo, who was the coach of Melbourne City. Didn't speak French, right? Clearly promoted internally. That's going to piss French people off. They actually held protests because there were rumors that he was that he was saying he didn't want to learn French. Now, I obviously think that's a little too far, right? The French people have protest over everything. But the most of the protests that Troyes fans have engaged in have been fair. Can you imagine if your record signing never played for you and they got loaned out to a parent club? And guess who's signing Savio, by the way? He's not the only example of this type of nonsense. But guess who signed Savio? I'll give you one guess because it's real obvious. Manchester City. You know who's probably not going to pay full price for Savio? Manchester City. Why are they not going to pay full price for Savio? Because they're negotiating with themselves. Why would they damage their own, FFP or whatever? Because for them, Troyes is not themselves, right? Manchester City is. So whose FFP are they going to care about in Manchester City's? Troyes going down to the Championnat National, well, looks basically guaranteed at this point, right? Because the fans kind of guaranteed it. But let's be honest, even if they beat Valenciennes, it's still very unlikely they're going to be able to catch Dunkirk. They're going to get caught in this 1 year where 4 teams get relegated and they're going to be sent down, right? And then they're going to have to try and battle their way out of the French 3rd division. And who knows how the promotion relegation is going to look. I mean, I'm sure somebody does, but I'm not that person after the league moves from 20 to 18 people. But a team that in 2022 was in Ligue 1 is looking at back-to-back relegations, and their number one signing has never played. And like I said, he's not the only one. I gotta find the other examples for you. In the summer of 2022, they spent 24 million euros, but none of their expensive signings have been given the time to make an impact. Amar Fata, signed from Swedish side Ike, played 19 minutes before being loaned to Lommel SK, a Belgian-owned club, which is in City Football Group. Jackson Perozzo made 17 starts and was then loaned to Olympiacos and then Kasım Pasha in Turkey. And Ike Ogbo made 9 starts before his loans to Cardiff and Sheffield Wednesday. They spent 24 million euros, and nobody from that class made more than 19 starts, and not because of injuries and not because they sold them, but because they got loaned out. One even to another City Football Group team in Lommel in Belgium. Like, it just, if you are a Troyes fan, you feel like just some sort of gear in a big machine, except you're the gear at the bottom, so everybody else is like grinding on you. I don't really know how gears work. And you're watching Girona in Spain reap the benefits of being in City Football Group. I can't even imagine how painful and annoying that is, because you're looking at a club that's owned by the exact same thing, right? That I would have argued at the start of their ownership was a smaller club than Troyes. I mean, Troyes won some European Cup against Newcastle. I can't remember what it was exactly in 2001. Former Troyes player and France international Jérôme Rothon, I gave it my best shot, said, through this player, everything is summed up, talking about Savio. They are using this club as a springboard for certain players, obviously. And in France, this is actually not the only club that has to do stuff like this, too. Strasbourg, obviously, owned by Chelsea. Nice is owned by Jim Ratcliffe, as I talked about, in a main channel video not too long ago. This is becoming pretty pervasive in French football, and they are going to, the fans are going, they're going to continue to rally against it in more and more dramatic ways. But when your team gets relegated back to back and has the resources of City Football Group, there's quite literally no excuse for that. Just terrible management from City Football Group, ignoring Troyes. And to have there's nothing worse, I think, in sports than to have owners that you can feel and are just ignoring you. And right now, Troyes is in line for back-to-back relegations. Back-to-back relegations suck a ton, even when your best player and your most expensive signing ever aren't playing for you because some giant omniscient football god decided that they weren't supposed to be there. Pour one out for the Troyes fans today, for real.